I am Ricardo González. I'm the CEO and founder of Bilingual America. I'm the author of The Six Stages of Cultural Mastery, The Six Stages of Cultural Sales, The 12 Hidden Truths to Learning Spanish, The Cultural Transformation Manifesto, and my newest book, which I think Phil and I will discuss today, is To Belong or Not to Belong. And the best advice I ever received was from my father. And he said, always ask questions. And the way he explained that to me was he said, it's better to be ignorant for a moment than your whole life. Ask questions. So I ask a lot of questions. So there we go, Phil. How's that?
That's great, man. So your dad gave you that advice, and you talk in your book though that you guys were estranged for a long time, man. So when did he give you that advice? Was that as a little shaver or now in adult life?
Yeah, I was no, I was little, but I wasn't like this like super cariñoso, like lovey-dovey type of advice. It was like, don't be a dumbass kind of advice. Just ask
Oh,
questions.
okay. That's good. No, that's good,
It
right?
was,
So
but it was good advice. I mean, I watched my dad. He was, he had an eighth grade education. He was, I think you know this because we know each other. He was one of 27 kids from, the hills of Puerto Rico. And he was a great salesperson, amazing. And he actually retired when he was 45. So he was never one of those guys who would just sit and teach you. But if you were observing and you were watching, you could learn a whole lot. And so I was very observant, and I would ask a lot of questions. They told me all growing up, you should be a lawyer, you should be a lawyer. Now I have a daughter who's a lawyer, but I never took that path. So it was one of those things. It was like, just ask, just ask, just ask. I always tell our clients that if you're not curious, you don't care,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I totally agree with that, right? You have to ask questions. You have to go deeper on those, right? Not just surface level. I mean, I think that's super key, super important for that. So Ricardo, so with that, I would not to denigrate you at all, but I don't consider you a sales guy. I think you're like me. You're a teacher who happens to sell, right?
Yeah,
So how
yeah.
did you pivot, or how did you move from that questioning sales into the teacher that you are today?
Yeah, I think we're all selling, either we're selling products or services or we're selling some sort of vision, right? We're always selling. That's the job of every leader, is to sell. You have to be able to sell your vision. You have to be able to compel people to want to take action. And I think you're going to enjoy this. I don't think we've ever had this conversation, but the word for sales in Spanish is venta, V-E-N-T-A. And the word for window is ventana. So it's the same root, venta, ventana, right? So to me, sales is always just creating that window for people so they can see for themselves what's good for them.
Mm,
So I
mm.
love the whole venta, ventana. My job is to open up your vision so you can see.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, we haven't talked about that before, which
Yeah,
is amazing because we've talked about a lot of stuff. So,
yeah.
about windows, right? Let's talk about belonging to those windows and
Goodness.
owning those because the new book is To Belong or Not to Belong. It's fantastic. I wish I had a physical copy. I know I'm going to get it
I got
soon.
it right
So,
here,
hold up
Phil.
the
This
book.
is yours. This is yours.
That one's mine? Yes. Good.
There you go.
So, yeah, fantastic. So,
There you
I've read the PDF though. I've been through it quite a few times. It's very interesting how you share so many stories. But I want to kind of bop around here in the book. I don't just
go.
want to go linearly because I think that's helpful. You talked about asking questions and about earnestly asking them and being curious. And late in the book, you talk about in Act 3, you talk about giving sincere praise, right? Sincere praise, this specific praise. So talk about that, Ricardo. How does that help us belong more?
So, like in the six stages of cultural mastery, the first stage of cultural mastery is education, right? So, what do we praise? We praise what we know about people, right? And honestly, most leaders don't know their people.
Mm,
So, so how do you properly praise people if you don't really know them, right? So, I think it does funnel into the whole questioning where you learn to like we teach in that process. We teach 7 different questions. that allow people to open up without feeling in any way like they're being imposed on or like you're being too prodding or perhaps even rude, right? People love to talk about themselves, but it has to be framed up correctly, correct? But as a leader, when I know people, when I know my people, then I know how to motivate them, right? I know what's important to them. And so then I can be what we talk about being culturally relevant, right? So like what's important to me may not be important to you. What's important to you may not be important to me. And that's the job of the leader, is to know their people well enough to be able to kind of motivate people at those levels, right? And so
Yeah.
I think the same thing is true in sales, right? I mean,
Yep.
how do in sales, people talk about, the hot buttons, but what are the hot buttons? The things that motivate me, the things that move me, the things that compel me. Those are the things that are going to motivate me. Like you want to sell me a car and you've got a Puerto Rican flag on the side of it, like from the factory, I probably would buy the damn thing, you know, you know,
Yeah. That's
because it's
funny.
so relevant to something that's important to me, right? And so, but I think that when we get into business and we want to try to, different people use different words, right? We want to streamline, or we want to duplicate, or whatever however you want to call it. We start to lose the individuality of people because we're going for percentages then. And I think at that point we start losing our power in sales because everyone's motivated in different things.
Yeah.
Different things are culturally relevant to different people.
Yeah, right. We have to sell to who's in front of us, which is very different maybe than who's making the whole decision. And I think that's a really great point. And you make that really well in the book as well, and your different stories and stuff. So
Yeah.
let's break this down. You just told us
Right.
about Ventana and Windows. Let's talk about belonging, Ricardo. Define belonging for folks so we can frame up this book and this conversation.
So for most people, belonging is like feeling comfortable someplace, but that's not really the depth of the meaning, right? The meaning is ownership. What belongs to me. So what do I feel like I would fight for, I would die for, I would sacrifice for? That's like the Ukrainian people. Like, this belongs to us. So no, we don't need a ride out. We need more ammunition, right? And so so to me, belongship is about ownership. And so to create belonging, how do you create ownership? How do you get people to feel like not only are they part of us, but us is part of them, right? And so I always contend, for example, we here in corporate America, we talk about giving people a seat at the table. Well, that doesn't imply belonging. Belonging would be they own the table just as much as I do.
Mm,
The
yeah.
table is just as much as theirs. So one thing implies that we're giving people something because we own it and we're just being benefactors, allowing people to sit in, right? The other one is you're just as important as I am here. And your views, your opinions, your frameworks, they matter just as much as mine do as a leader, right? So I think one is a little bit condescending, to be honest with you. But if we want to create true belongship, it's really a matter of how do we create a sense of ownership, right? So that we share in that mutually. I love, for example, in Spanish, and I'll just kind of keep taking us back here. In Spanish, we have the word socio, which means partner. And now in America, we've kind of shifted from this concept of employee to associate, which literally means partner, right? So an employee was subservient, but an associate is a partner. And so I think that to create real belonging, we have to treat people like partners.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that works for employees. I think that works when you're selling, right? I talk about we have to be on the same side
Yeah.
against the problem, right? If I'm trying to sell you something, you have a problem and we're going to fix it together. You own the solution as much as I do. It's give and take, and that's value both ways, and that's how things move forward. Even more than even more than just, oh, here's the answer, right? But we have to get you to buy in first. We have to get you to own it yourself so that you can see that solving that problem is important to you. Is that what you're seeing as well,
Yeah, I
Ricardo?
mean, when does that transference of emotional ownership take place? Is it transactionary in nature, or is it actually emotional in nature before contracts are even signed or before money is passed? I would contend that it's emotional in nature, and then the rest is just transactional and just happens as a de facto because something happened inside of someone where they go, I want this. I want to be part of
Okay.
it, right? I think that belonging is much more deeply emotional and personal than it is in any sense of corporate type or certainly from a policy standpoint. And that's part of the problem we're running into. And frankly, why I wrote the book, everything I was reading on belonging was kind of static, right? It was very corporate, data, companies who do have better stats or analytics in these areas, higher levels of belonging than they do export business and so on and so forth. And I've included a little bit of that, especially in the beginning of the book, just to give a framework. But the point is that belonging is not policy. It can't be policy. It's personal. So what makes me feel like I want to be someplace might repel you.
Yeah.
Right? So I can't have a blanket policy across the board and expect that policy is going to create belonging for the majority of people. It's just not going to happen that way. It's deeply, deeply personal. This requires leaders to be much more high context, much more relational than low context results, data driven. And that's a big gap right now that we have in our leadership because we have very low context leaders, which basically means results driven, driven by change and getting a sense of identity through individual accomplishment, as opposed to we have now a pretty high context group of young people, and especially minority groups that are driven by relationships, they're driven by purpose, right? And they're getting their sense of identity through the well-being of the group. And so now I have these very low context leaders, these very high context associates, and the chasm is too great, right? And so I think that there's a case where the leader of the future is going to have to become much more balanced in this area.
Yeah. So future, I mean, isn't that true now though? I mean, don't we have
It is, but we're not there.
Yeah.
It is, but we're not there, right?
Okay. All right.
And so I say future because we're not there.
Gotcha.
It's a
Okay.
skill set that has to be learned beyond just the emotional or the attitudinal. That there are actually skills that are engaged in this.
Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the interesting parts about your book, Ricardo, is while you have story, at the end of each chapter, there's actually work to do, which I think is really helpful, right? I think the way that you laid out the book it's a book. If I, as a leader, right, as a salesperson, certainly each chapter can stand on its own to do some work. Not to do all the work, right, but to do some work. And I think that's really great. So let's talk about a couple of those chapters, Ricardo, because I think they're super important. Certainly we could, just the massivity, but let's shrink this in a little bit here. Your personal piece, but your stories, man, are great. So let's hit a couple of those. Let's talk about giving credit where credit belongs. And I will tell you, as you share your story here, I once was a glory hound and stole, the credit deservedly, but it completely demoralized my team members. So talk to us about that and credit, right, and why that's so important as it relates to belonging.
Yeah, so it might help the listeners to get a framework of the way the book is laid out, right? Because it's to belong or not to belong, which obviously is taken from to be or not to be from Hamlet, right, from Shakespeare's work. And it's a different type of approach because it's actually not in chapters. The book is designed in three acts, and there's 10 scenes in each act. And the first act is personal belonging, which is really that deeply personal nature of it. The second act is social belonging, and then the third act is corporate belonging. So it really touches on the different spheres of belonging, right? And to touch on that, where like giving away that credit, right? So I think the story that I told in the book is I had one of my very first gig in life was in a church in Wisconsin, and I know you're originally from Wisconsin. And the senior minister, I don't know, he just wasn't a big, huge fan. I went to him, and I was in charge of community outreach. I was young. I was probably 22, 23. And I wanted to do this thing, which was like a commemorative night for public servants. So law enforcement, fire, paramedics, these types of people, right? And he just laughed at me when I went in with the idea. He laughed at me. He says, "I'm not, I don't think that's a good idea. And I don't think anybody's going to come." And I'm like, "Well, I'd like to try it. I think they will." And he actually literally, Phil, forced me that if I wanted to do this, I had to pay out of my own measly salary, because it was a measly salary. I think I was making less than $16,000 a year. So he said to me, "If you want to do this, you have to buy all the stamps, buy all the envelopes. You have to print out the invitations. Your money, your thing." I believed in it so much that I did it. I wanted to make my mark, right? And so I started sending out these invitations. "We'd like to invite you to this evening of commemoration and gratitude for your service to our community," so on and so forth. It was through the church. And first day, I remember this so vividly. The RSVPs, it was all RSVPs. The RSVPs came back. I think we got 8 RSVPs back the first day, and they were all, "No, I'm not coming." And literally, the senior minister comes into my office, and he's holding these things up and doing this because he checked the mail. He was a control freak. And he checked the mail. He brought the mail into me. He says, "I told you." That's fine. Let's see what happens tomorrow. Well, the next day, it's always that next day, right? The next day, we had like 10 people said they were coming. And anyways, it turned out to be this big, huge thing. The church was as full as it had ever been in its history. And it was this bittersweet moment because he took all the credit. He did not even recognize me in public for the work that I had put into it, that it was my idea. It was him. The whole thing was him. And when that happened, guess what else happened? I no longer wanted to belong there. I checked out, right? And so I think that it's just one of the lessons of belonging. You want people to feel like they're there, they want to be there, give them the credit when they deserve the credit. Don't take it from them. Don't take their moment. Create those moments. Share those moments. Make it a big deal, because that makes people feel like, hey, I'm part of this. But what I do is also recognized as being important to this thing we all belong to. People will check out very quickly when they don't get credit for what they've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. When I did that, my guy, he completely checked out, man. I learned that lesson, thankfully,
Yeah.
fairly quickly in my career, but man, that's so it'll like something, especially as a new leader, it's really hard. It's really hard to do.
So here's the thing. We're always talking about, what do I do to help people want to belong? But the other part of that is people actually can choose where they want to belong. Right? It's not all on you.
Yeah.
They have that
Yeah.
choice. Do I want to belong here? Do I not want to belong here? Now, what we do as leaders can create that environment that's going to attract and hold people. Right?
Definitely.
I remember not too long ago, I was doing some work with a college, and they had hired a woman for public relations, and she was incredibly skilled and gifted and very recognized. And she quit after 6 weeks. And so they asked me to interview her to find out what happened. Right? And I asked her, I said, when did you start to actually believe that you didn't want it? You gotta catch this, right? When did you believe you didn't want to be there? Because be and belong, right? I don't want to be here. Anytime someone says, I don't want to be here, they're saying, I don't want to belong here. Okay? And she said, the first day I started having doubts. She said, but after a week, I knew I was leaving. It was just a matter of time. What I think most leaders don't recognize, Phil, is how many people have already checked out who are just biding their time.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. When I was in the military, we called it people that quit and stayed, right?
Yeah.
They basically, they internally, they're like, I'm done. I don't belong here anymore. But they kept collecting a paycheck. And that's the worst, man. That's, because if you're not aware as a leader, boy, that can really poison your team and take your productivity right in the toilet. And it'll infect the rest of the team and make them feel like they can't belong too.
Yeah. it's the craziest thing, I mean, it's like a virus,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely is. Absolutely, man. So yeah, so let's one of the analogies that you use in the book like really illustrated belonging well, and that was the Beverly Hillbillies. I thought that was
Yeah.
really interesting because when I think about that, right, that was worlds colliding and totally no belonging there. So explain a little more about that and how that fits or doesn't fit, I guess, in belonging.
Some people shouldn't be in some places, right? And that's okay. It's one of the lessons of the book is that not everyone should belong everywhere. Jed Clampett and the Clampett clan, they did not belong. They didn't belong in Beverly Hills. They were just odd there, right? And so if you watch that show through a cultural lens, what you really see is this cultural conflict. You see people who are from a particular culture who are trying to live in another culture where they don't belong. Okay. Now you can either try to shoehorn fit yourself in there and force everyone somehow to be okay with you being there, but your whole life there, you're going to feel like you don't belong, no matter what you do. Okay. You can try to shout people down and try to get people to accept you, do whatever for you, but you're not going to change those people. They are who they are, for good or for bad. They have their culture, right? I think a lot of conflict that we're experiencing in America right now is because we have a lot of people who want to fit into certain cultures where they just don't belong. So why keep wasting time? Be happy where you're at or where you fit, who you are. It's a short life to be in so much conflict. And so the Beverly Hillbillies, if you look at it, and some, your younger listeners, they might not even know what the Beverly, it was a sitcom in the 60s, right? It was at that time in history where the show actually started in black and white and it ended in color, right? And I mean, they called the swimming pool the cement pond, right? I mean, it came out of the Ozarks, right? The guy he struck oil, got a bunch of money. He says, "We're moving to the Beverly Hills, man. That's where rich people live." Well, they were rich, but they didn't fit, right? I go back to my dad. I mentioned him earlier. Had an 8th grade education, great salesperson. He retired when he was 45. Retired when he was 45. Just great salesperson, had restaurants, did very, very well. But still to this day, I can't get my dad to enjoy a dinner in a 5-star hotel. Doesn't enjoy it, doesn't want to be there. But he knows who he is. I mean, he won't go to a Nordstrom or Macy's. He'd much prefer to go to Walmart. That's just what, he's just so real that he doesn't try to be something he's not or somebody he's not. And he doesn't try to fit where he doesn't want to be. And I respect that about him. I really do. And so I think that it's not always that we should belong everywhere. That takes a lot of emotional toll on people. And I think a lot of us need to start facing that. We're trying to fit into places where, maybe it really just doesn't even deserve our energy. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Ricardo. We're not meant to fit in everywhere. I will tell you, I don't fit in small town America. I grew up there, never fit in. I feel very much myself where I am now in Florida. It's just very interesting, right? To your point, I think that's super true and super important that we can embrace where you are, be where you are, and be where you fit, be where you belong.
And be who you are, right?
Right, right.
I mean, I live in the Dominican Republic, and and family's Puerto Rican, and my mother was an orphan from the state of Kentucky, so I'm half and half, right? Cher had the song "Half Breed." You remember that song, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's politically correct anymore. I doubt it. But anyways, there's this great struggle that people have, and it has a lot to do with belonging, and that is this these dual struggles of identity and identification, right? So identity is, who do I believe I am? And identification is who other people believe I am and how they view me, right? And I'm a former minister, and there's one thing in the Bible that just stands out at me, and that's when they asked Jesus, "Who are you?" And his answer was, "I am who I am." He would never tell them. He's like, "You figure that out. That is your problem. That is not my problem. If I have to spend my whole life trying to get other people to see me the way I want them to see me, I'm going to be miserable." And I think there's a great example of belonging. I know who I am. I know my identity. Good. However you identify me, that's your business. We're living in a day, Phil, where people are trying so hard to get everything, when the fact of the matter is we should relax a little bit. We don't have to have everything. We just have to be who we are. We have to be where we're supposed to be. We need to be who we're supposed to be with. But the world's a big place, Phil. You know, full of God knows how many myriads of religion and belief systems and all kinds of stuff. You know, and we can choose to fight with everyone else over that, or we can choose to find where we belong. And I'm just for finding where we belong, you know?
Wow.
And I think it's a powerful message of the book. I really think it's an important message for the day we're living.
Yeah, fight or find. I think that's a good that's a good reminder, man. Good reminder. So, well, wow. So lots more that we
But
could go into in the book, Ricardo. You've got a lot into belong or not to
that's why.
belong. So let's go just a little bit more into one piece here. When we talk about leadership, um, I want to talk about you say to have people on your team go to their
Yeah.
games, show up for people in a tribe at their important games. Now, I think about that, and your story in the book, I have to tell you, out of all the stories in the book, that one resonated with me the most. My dad never saw me play any sports, never saw me compete academically, wasn't at my boot camp graduation. Like pretty much every day that was important to me, save for maybe one, my dad didn't show up to. And so, it took a long time for me to feel like part of that side of the family. So talk to me more about what that means and how as leaders we can do a better job of showing up for our people.
Man, I think that it's not just leaders, it's salespeople, right? One of the most compelling things we can do is just be there, right? Just be there. And give an example. If I want to sell into the Hispanic community, right? And I want to start making a mark in that community with whatever product or service or whatever it is I'm selling. Every Sunday afternoon all over the United States, these people are gathered together, first of all, in family and local restaurants, but in soccer leagues, right? And so because the chapters, that scene is called Go to Their Games because my dad didn't go to my games, right? And same thing, unfortunately, we have that in common. Didn't go to my college graduation, and it's hurtful, right? Didn't see me pitch the no-hitter, right? And those things hurt. But if you're trying to reach a community or a group of people, go to their games. It's simple. It's not difficult. I personally, I would go to these soccer games. I would sponsor a team. I wouldn't try to do a bunch of advertising and marketing and telling people how Hispanic friendly we are. Man, find a team that needs new uniforms. Maybe they need a place that needs the grass needs to be restored or something. If you have a business, invest in that. Because guess what you just did? You just won over a group of people. And the reason you won them over is because you went to their game.
Right on. Yeah. Like the bad news bears, right? We've all got a need, right? We've all got a need to be sponsored for people to show up, to cheer us on, and to be part of our our community, part of our belonging, right?
Right. Right. I mean, if I want people to want to belong to me, I have to show them, I think, first that I want to belong to them. I want to be a part of that community. I want to be part of that people. So I have to put my foot forward. And that's what leaders do, right? Leaders don't wait on other people to see what they're going to do, then respond to that or react to that.
Right.
Leaders are proactive, and leaders go, okay, I want to reach this person. I want to reach this group of people. So I'm going to do something that is meaningful to that person, or I'm going to do something that's meaningful for that group of people. And I can't think of very many things that would be more meaningful to a group of Hispanics than maybe sponsoring their soccer team, and
Yeah.
maybe fixing up their field. I mean, it's a simple example, but hopefully what it does is it gets people thinking in terms of not what can I say, what can I do?
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah. What can I do? So with that, Ricardo, if I want to get started belonging better and being someone that shares ownership, that gives people, empowers people to belong to something that they're part of, or maybe if for me to belong to something better, how would I get started on that journey, Ricardo?
I encourage people to read the book.
Of course. Yep.
Um, it's personal, Phil. Not only is it personal, for some people, it's painful. In the part on social belonging, there's the first scene there is on, I think the first one is on suicide. And the ultimate statement of I don't want to belong is to take your life. The ultimate statement of I don't feel like I even want to belong on this earth is to want to take your life. We're struggling with mental disease and great angst in our culture. And if anybody's listening, I have a great deal of empathy for this because my mother attempted suicide. And I happened to be 9, 10 years old, I think it was 9. And I walked in on her. Eyes were rolled up in her head. And, what do you do? I don't even know how I had the wherewithal to call 911. Right. And that's traumatic, and that certainly leaves a mark on you. Right. But my mother did not want to belong. She was an orphan, never felt like she belonged, was rejected as a child. I get it. What do we do, Phil, in our enterprises, in our the other one is the data is in the book. But so many hundreds of thousands of kids a year run away from home in the United States. Adolescents, young kids. What does that say when someone doesn't want to belong to the one place where they should feel like they're home?
Yeah. Wow. That's tough, man.
Travesty, right? But we got to recognize, what is it? 1 in 10 people who actually attempt suicide follow through with it. So there are a lot of people who are in our workplaces who we would never know, and we will never know. Not only would we not know, we will not know. Have perhaps run away from home, attempted suicide, or some other thing that's been deeply traumatic to them. And now we come with this corporate policy of belonging. And this person has never felt like they belong to anything in their life. And that's why I say it's so deeply personal, it cannot be policy.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I would think that, going back to your question, if somebody really wants to start on this journey, the journey starts inward first. Not thinking in terms of where do I want to be. But I think people have to define for themselves and really go through this process of who am I? What's important to me? What are my own values? What are my own beliefs? What are my own expectations of life? Because when I'm clear on that, then I can begin to seek a group or groups of people that align with that. Because it's about alignment. Belonging is about alignment. I'm not going to feel like I belong anywhere if I'm not aligned with it. Right? And so, moving past like political ideologies and all that stuff, but to the core of our being, once I know who I am, what I deeply believe, what's deeply important to me, I can then proactively start seeking out people, groups, associations that align with that. And that's where I'm going to feel like I belong. I'm not, if you have, I don't even want to get into examples where you could do this. It might be fun, but, if you have certain beliefs about certain social things, right? Whatever those beliefs might be, you're not going to feel like you belong in a group of people who hold a diametrically opposing belief. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to be a militant to try to change those people. What it really means is I might waste my life doing it. I don't know. I'll never be happy. That's for sure. Right. Okay. I got to take that inward journey, and then I have to find those groups of people that align with who I am as a human being. Things that are important to me, things that I value. Like for me personally, it's very important for me to live in a Latin American country. That's a personal thing for me. I'm a different person when I'm in the U.S. than I am when I'm in, say, the Dominican or Puerto Rico or different Latin American countries. Because there are certain values and beliefs that are within those cultures that mean something to me. They're important to me. And I don't get that in the U.S. So that's a choice. I think one of the things that people don't recognize is that they get to choose where they belong and with whom they belong. But if you don't take that inward journey first, and for people who've been in a lot of pain, Phil, they may want to do this with a close friend. They may want to do that with a mentor. I even have recommended to some people to read this book with another person. And after each scene, to just talk. There's some questions at the end called Spotlight on You. And talk those through with another person that you trust. Because some of those things are going to be painful. Guarantee it. I cried several times writing this book. And you've read the book, so you know why. Some things aren't easy. Some things we have to really face and dig deep. And so I think the journey starts inward, and then I think it can extend outward. I wouldn't start outward.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's so important, right? To do your own work first, figure out who you are, right? Figure out your identity first, who you are, and then ask yourself, where do I align? And then remember that you get to choose. I think those are great words from you there, Ricardo. Lots of great insight. Folks, if you're looking to get the book, you can go to ricardogonzalez.com/belonging. Get a copy of the book. It's fantastic. It's hard. It's work. It's worth it if you're willing to do it. So congratulations, Ricardo, on a great book. Thank you for a great conversation as always. And I wish you all the success in this. And I hope everybody understands belonging is a choice. You can decide to belong or not to belong. And a lot of that starts with you, who you are. Thank you, Ricardo.